Hello and welcome to episode 9 of What That Means Is. And today is great because we have Chris back. Chris
Hello.
Riddell.
Nice to be here. Good. I'm good.
He's had a little hiatus,
A little bit.
but back with bells on.
You can't see them, but
No.
they're on.
And they're going to be like chiming and ringing today. And so Ken Drysdale back to help us out with interpreting this report. And of course, I'm Rosalie Drysdale. So great to have you. We're excited to dive into this today. So we will actually. We're going to start with page 60. And we're going to call this episode 9 on page 60. So we're working our way through. We're getting closer to page 89, and we're gonna make this work. So again, we're kind of chopping away at all of this, kind of as per your idea of explaining it to a grade fiver, which is very helpful for me.
I don't know. There's some pretty complex grade fivers these days. I was just wanting to mention, because sometimes people may not have seen the previous episodes.
Okay.
So what we're talking about here is we're referring to this report, and there's a picture up on the screen, and there's a download link on the ribbon below. So what we're doing is we're on, as Rosalie said, we're on episode 9, and we're going through this particular report. So we'll refer to page numbers. It's in this report. You can download it from our website.
So Chris and I are just going to introduce this a little bit before Ken starts taking it away. So page 60, forced or mandated vaccines. So we've been kind of leading up to this up until now. So the intent of this report, as it says here in the first sentence, is to highlight issues that were known to or ought to have been known to be causing harm on or about May of 2021. And these were given emergency approval, these vaccines, for use in Canada, December 9, 2020. And so we've got in this box, that box right there, tells you what Health Canada was stating to Canadians, to the citizens, to everyone who was going to be recipient. They were hoping everybody would be a recipient of this vaccine. So their statement was, do you want to say something about that, Chris?
The statement on December 9th, 2020, thanks to advances in science and technology and an unprecedented level of global cooperation, today, Canada reached a critical milestone in its fight against COVID-19 with the authorization of the first COVID-19 vaccine. This is right from Health Canada's information.
And they received Pfizer's submission on October 9th, 2020, after a thorough, this is according to the Canadian government, after a thorough independent review of the evidence, they said they had stringent safety, efficacy, and quality requirements for the use of Canada, and they would be going by those guidelines. I'd like to know, well, that's quite a statement, isn't it?
Yeah, that's makes you feel pretty good, eh?
It should make you feel real safe, and a lot of people did. So what would these stringent requirements be, actually, as a part of continued commitment to openness and transparency? Take it away, Chris.
Yeah. Well, it's supposed to include a high-level summary of the evidence that Health Canada reviewed to support the authorization of the vaccine. It's going to include a detailed scientific summary and the full clinical trial data package.
Apparently, Canadians can feel confident that they will closely monitor the safety of the vaccines. This was their pledge in
The
this.
process was rigorous.
Yes, and they would
That's right
continue.
here.
Yeah, exactly. An initial indication of the vaccine is for use in people 16 years of age or older, and clinical trials on children of all age groups, and the indication would be revised in the future. So what clinical trials were being done specifically? That's what Ken's going to kind of get into. Maintaining Canada. They're going to maintain Canada's highest standards. So, Ken, was that in fact done as was promised?
Well,
so eloquently?
Being my age and having grown up on the farm, I look at things in a certain way. And when I read this and I was aware of what actually happened, it reminded me of when my father, a long time ago, and I was a little boy, he was going to teach me to swim. And he held his arms out to me. We were in the old swimming hole. And he handed his arms out to me. He said, "Come on, son, I'll hold you. Come on in the water, and I'll teach you how to swim." And I went in, and goodness, my dad took me. I got on his back. He was a big, strong man, and we swam out to the middle of the old swimming hole, and then Dad disappeared. And I was freaking out. And this might sound a little bit crazy, but this is exactly, when I read this, it brought back memories of my father and the old swimming hole, because, you know, Health Canada said that it had been rigorously reviewed. Health Canada said they had a strong monitoring system in place to make sure that nothing was going to go wrong and that Canadians could be assured of all of this.
Feel confident.
They
Feel
can
confident.
feel confident.
Yeah.
So let's talk about, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about exactly what they did. You know, it's worthwhile to mention that mRNA vaccines have never been used before in humans. Never before has it been introduced to the general public, and they've never been successful before now. So it was a completely new technology, and certainly the words in Health Canada's statement to Canadians were welcomed. You know, that they were going to had a strong monitoring system in process. So let's talk about that monitoring system. They had a voluntary monitoring system, and we talked about this in previous
Yes, we did,
episodes.
yeah.
It's, you know, it's kind of like it's a voluntary speeding law. So, you know, you don't get a ticket. The cops aren't out there going to give you a ticket, but if you speed, you're supposed to go in and report yourself. That's kind of the system they had to monitor this. You know, most people didn't even know what the name, and still don't know what the name of the Canadian system is. And Rosalie, since we talked about that last time, and we were stumped, although we did put it in the ribbon roll in the bottom. What is the name of the voluntary monitoring system for reactions to vaccines in Canada?
Okay, I have to take a deep breath before I say it because it's a lot of words. Canadian Adverse Events Following Immunization Surveillance System. Okay, I'll say that again. Canadian Adverse Events Following Immunization Surveillance System, CAEFISS. So how would you say that? CAFIS?
CAFIS.
Well, you know, it also reminds me of the old TV shows when I was a kid, you know, and they used to say to the camera, "Can any one of you in the audience put up your hand who have ever heard of that before?" Oh, wait a minute, I see Teresa, Tam, and I see, but you know, no one else does. People have heard of the VAERS system. That's an American voluntary system. And by the way, they've done some studies in the United States about the VAERS system and how accurate it is. In other words, if they report one adverse reaction, how many adverse reactions actually happen? You know, the ones that weren't reported. And the studies say up to 32 times more. So if you had one report, 32 times that is what you actually experience. Now, some people will probably be aware that there's a system also in Canada called CARES, and CAERS, I believe. And that's a voluntary system that's been set up by a few volunteers. I believe they're on the East Coast. Really nice folks, but they set it up themselves. And again, it's a voluntary system. So,
Can I ask a question?
yes.
Anywhere in this Health Canada authorizes first COVID-19 vaccine, is it say anywhere in there or give any indication that there should be any kind of a system where you would report anything that would go wrong? Is it, or they're just saying it's going to be okay?
They say in the 1, 2, 3, you know, showing it on the screen right now, Canadians can feel confident that the review process was rigorous and that we have strong monitoring systems in place.
Strong monitoring system.
So you know,
Is
Chris,
that what
if you want.
Yeah,
If you
that's
want.
what we're to assume. This Canadian surveillance system,
Yeah.
that's which no one's heard of.
yes. Well, now, Chris, you were a police officer. How do you think voluntary reporting would have gone in your previous vocation?
Yeah, how would it change your life then?
Well, it would have. It would have been more people turning themselves in. I guess we just stayed at the station and waited for people to come in and turn themselves in.
You may have been overwhelmed.
Actually, it never worked.
Well, you know, and again, I want to make sure that folks understand we're taking a little bit of a lighter approach on these videos, and the reason being is, at least I remember when I was a kid, and in the wintertime, my mom would come in with cod liver oil, and I never wanted to take it, and so they used to mix a little honey with it, and then we would take it. So that's what we're doing here. So don't misunderstand that this is incredibly serious,
Absolutely.
but we're trying to make it so that it's palatable. You can
swallow
sit
it.
through it. Yeah,
So you can swallow it.
exactly.
Yeah.
So they had a voluntary system of reporting problems with it. And I personally know many people who had significant issues. I know a person that got their shot, and they were immediately, they got home and immediately started to bleed from the nose and never had that before. And they were ambulanced to the hospital. and it was never reported on the adverse system because the doctor said, "Oh, it's not related." So it's an interesting phenomena to me, you guys, that if you came into the hospital and you'd had a heart attack, because remember in our previous show we talked about, that it was like 46% of all the people that counted as dying from COVID had at least 3 serious
Right.
comorbidities.
Yep.
So just to put it in perspective, so you come into the hospital, you've had a heart attack, maybe you got dementia, and what's your third one? Diabetes. And you die, and they test you, and there's COVID in there, they count it as a COVID death. But when you just got the shot, and you go home, and you start to bleed out of your nose, and they take you by ambulance to the hospital, they say, "Oh, no, it's got nothing to do with the shot." How is that? How does that work?
And to make matters worse, later on in the report, we talk about the time constraints before they call you fully vaccinated or vaccinated.
Yes.
7 days, 14 days. So if you got vaccinated and didn't get sick after 14 days, they didn't even count it. So it wipes out another.
And on the converse, I hope I'm not jumping ahead too far here, but on page 61, where it says effectiveness, clinical trials showed that beginning 1 week after the second dose, the Pfizer BioNTech Comirnaty COVID vaccine was about 95% effective, 100%. So 1 week, perhaps it was effective because the recipient wasn't even sick.
Well, the other thing about this is, and I've referred to this before, and you can count this as a bit of a teaser for an upcoming episode, but when they say it was 95% effective, that's not absolute effectiveness. Now, I know you don't know what that is yet, and I'm teasing you to do some research for the next one, but what they've done is they're reporting that as relative efficacy. It's not absolute efficacy, it's relative efficacy. And I know you're scratching your head, but this will take a whole episode to do, and you will be shocked at what we tell you.
I mean, I'm not a physician, but even...
You're not?
No. I hate to break it.
Too bad.
I know. Effectiveness, 1 week after. I mean, it seems sort of... It's almost like a useless stat to show us 1 week after.
I made a note by mine.
Oh, yeah.
It says lies. It's completely wrong. And how can they, like I said, when we talk about them telling you, well, you're really not vaccinated for 14 days after
Right.
you've received your injection. So how do they make these claims if you're
Right.
not vaccinated?
So this would be
Yeah.
the first vaccination? The first
Actually,
jab?
they call it the 1 week after the second dose.
the second dose. Okay, yeah, right.
Well,
right.
the other interesting thing about that little box there, which was taken from Health Canada, and this was issued about the time that the vaccines came out. You'll notice it says 100% effective for 12 to 15-year-olds, and it says 90.7% effective for 5 to 11-year-old. Guess what? They never tested it on anybody under the age of 16. The clinical trials didn't include children, and so how are they making those statements?
And none of those people were being vaccinated at the time of this report.
Right.
Absolutely. Well,
See my note I put here?
Li- you said Lies.
Yeah.
It says lies.
Anyway, those were, so that's the first claim that the Health Canada statement to assure Canadians was that they were doing rigorous or detailed or a strong monitoring system, and now we come to know that it's a voluntary system. We all know folks that had problems and it was never reported, and we know that in the United States, previous studies have said that the VAERS system underreports by a factor of 32. So that's the first claim they made.
Wow.
Now, and by the way, also in the report, we've on page 62, there's just a listing of some of the reported side effects due to COVID-19 vaccination in Canada, and that was as of February 25th of 2022. And you can see that a total of 80 million vaccine doses were given, and that adverse side effects had been reported 39,000 times. So it says that's about 5 out of 10,000 people who have reported one or more adverse events. Now, this one's really interesting on a whole bunch of different levels. Rosalie, if you remember, in a previous episode, we were talking about how Health Canada was reporting the adverse reactions to children, and this was a little bit later on, and they reported, and instead of reporting there were 100 adverse reactions or 200 adverse reactions, they reported it as 263, I think it was, 200,000.
Right. Yes,
Every
I remember
100,000 shots, there was 263 adverse reactions. Now that doesn't sound like a big number, but when you multiply it by 2 million children who had had that shot at the time, it becomes a big number.
It was 6,000 in some, wasn't it?
Something like
yeah,
that.
it was over 6,000.
And you can look back on our previous episode. But
Yeah.
in this one, look at what they've done again. Don't you think that you would, as a scientific person, as an engineer, when I was an engineer and I was practicing, you'd be very careful about your words, and you'd be very careful about consistency in words. So remember, they reported for children 200 and something per 100,000 population. Well, here they're reporting it as 5 people out of 10,000.
Right.
So instead of a number like X number, instead of something out of 100,000 like they reported for children, now they're reporting it as 5 out of 10,000. And by the way,
Once again, seeming to make it minimizing the number of adverse reactions.
well, exactly, and again, there's 80 million shots that have been given. So you do the arithmetic. That's one big number, and I will do the arithmetic, and I'll put it down on the ribbon below on when we do the final processing of this video, and we'll see if those numbers work out. But again, keep in mind that this is in a voluntary system, and I'm not sure what had to happen in order for you to get a report in, or if folks who went home and had adverse reactions actually reported it, or whether the medical community actually submitted them.
Well, I have to say, in real life experiences and things I've heard from people,
So when people went to the hospital with these adverse events, they were told not what it might be, but they were told in no uncertain terms what it wasn't. It was not the vaccine.
So it never got into the reporting system.
No.
You know, the other interesting thing about this is, of course, this box we're talking about is taken from the Government of Canada's website. And you'll notice that it talks about serious adverse reactions, and you can see it on the screen here. But it's serious adverse events are rare but do occur. They include anaphylaxis, which has been reported in so many cases. That's why you need to wait a period of time. Well, no, wait a minute. Okay, so they're talking about severe reactions to the vaccine. And they talk about allergic reaction, which is anaphylaxis. What about death? We know that Health Canada has reported up to, I think it was May of this year, Health Canada was reporting 384 deaths due to the vaccine. I would think that a severe reaction might be death, and that wouldn't you want to know that that was a possibility?
Might want to put those numbers in there.
Yeah.
But when you read this, it doesn't. You have no idea that people have died. You know they have allergic reactions, but you don't know they're dying.
And why would why would that make people afraid? Because people have allergic reactions all the time, just from the air in the spring and the fall. So that wouldn't really make people afraid.
And you know, earlier on in the whole pandemic, Health Canada was reporting on their website deaths. It was actually an interactive chart, and you could choose to look at cases, you could choose to look at hospitalizations, and you could choose to look at deaths, and then that was removed. So
Really?
Yeah. Now, so I think that gives you some idea of how carefully the government was or was not monitoring. It's up to you to decide whether or not what you think about that, having a voluntary system to monitor a vaccine which was using a completely new and unheard of technology, mRNA, never been used before in humans. And they put it out and were forcing people to take it. Some people weren't doing this voluntarily. They were being forced. You were going to lose your job. You couldn't travel. You couldn't go see grandma. You couldn't do a lot of things. You couldn't go into to a restaurant. So they were forcing people, and yet they were not enhancing their system of monitoring. You know, Chris, we talked about this a little bit before, the difference between responsibility and the difference between fiduciary responsibility. And you know, it's like if I go fishing and Chris asks me what kind of fish I caught, and I tell him, you know, I caught a pickerel this big, Chris. Well, you know, I kind of have a responsibility to be truthful to Chris, but you know, we all exaggerate about the size of the fish we catch. Now, do you want to talk a little bit about the difference between that responsibility and a fiduciary responsibility?
Well, I guess the difference that I'm thinking of right away is when I'm gathering information, if I want to retell something, I don't know how big that fish was you caught.
Good point.
Like it's that simple.
Yeah.
You don't have enough information to do anything with that story.
Yeah, and it's also, for instance, when you're in a special position of responsibility. And what do I mean by that? We've told this story before too. I get my paycheck, and I'm stupid enough to go to the casino and blow it all that night. Well, that's pretty dumb, but that was my money. But if I'm looking after Chris's grandma's money, and they're trusting me, and I go take that into the casino and gamble it away, I had a whole different responsibility there.
Right.
And that's called it's a higher level of responsibility. So when you're in a position of power or in a position of trusted responsibility, then your level of the requirement on you to do the right thing is higher.
But you know what really knocks me out with all of this is that nowhere do you see the government actually putting forth the information that this is based on, well, we're doing all this for you, yada, 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 stringent safety efficacy, highest standards, closely monitoring. Nowhere do you read that anything is based on voluntary reporting.
Yeah.
But if we're doing all this stuff, but please, if you have something happen, please come and tell us. None of that.
Yeah.
There's no, who knew that there was even such a thing?
Yeah.
So it's not stated anywhere.
But isn't it interesting too, though, because on page 63, I've got a little report there from the CDC, which is the adverse reactions reporting system there, and it's a voluntary system. The VAERS system is a voluntary system. The UN has a system as well, and it's shown a little bit later on in the report.
Is it also voluntary?
It's a voluntary system, and it's called the Vigi Access system. It's voluntary.
Is that the World Health Organization?
Yes.
So my question on that is, have they just gathered up what everybody else had with their volunteer system?
Yes.
Or did they actually have? Okay.
Absolutely.
Then that's
Once they put it through their grid, who knows what those numbers are?
Right.
But how is it that these are voluntary systems?
Exactly.
And they're not mandatory. Somebody comes in and they say they've had a reaction, it should go into the system. And then they should investigate it and decide. But somebody in triage in the hospital shouldn't say, oh, no, it's not, just go home.
I mean, is there research to tell whether it used to be mandatory with all the other vaccines? Was it mandatory
No.
before? It was never mandatory.
Interesting.
That's
huh?
interesting.
Now, so that talks to you about, remember how Health Canada in their statement said they had such a careful system of monitoring. Now we're going to talk about how they talked about a rigorous, I'm just going to go back here because I want to get
Love
the
that.
words right.
Rigorous.
They said Canadians can feel confident
Yep.
that the review process was rigorous.
rigorous.
So let's just take a look at that. On page 65, there's a table 1, and this is taken right out of Pfizer-BioNTech's monograph information, the information that they provided to Health Canada so they could evaluate the safety of these vaccines. Now, I'm going to talk about the science that they keep talking to you about, and I'm going to do a shout out to somebody. I'm going to do a shout out to Mr. Ingram Oja, who was my physics teacher in high school. Now I went through university as an engineer, and I took all kinds of science and chemistry and laboratory stuff and all that kind of stuff that a lot of us did in school and university and didn't really enjoy it. But all through high school with Mr. Oja, a good shout out to him. I enjoyed those classes and I learned a lot. And so
Can I just add, you must have had a very good physics teacher to enjoy that class. and just for the record, ladies and gentlemen, that's the only class Ken aced. I wouldn't even take it.
well, I don't know. I took typing and I did pretty good there too.
Oh, okay.
But so let's turn to page 65, table 1. It's on the screen right now. And this is the summary information from Pfizer on the testing that they did, the testing upon which the government of Canada authorized the use of this vaccine on people in the general public.
Right.
So you would think that, in keeping with, this was 2021 or 2020, I guess.
Yeah.
And, you trust the science, and it's going to be rigorous, and it's going to reflect the 21st century, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So here's now let's take a look at the table. So the very first thing that jumps out to me is it says, where it's being shown on the screen right now, it says relevant cases, and it says N equals 42,086. That means in the study were 42,086 patients. That's the people they were studying. So you would think they would know everything about those people, but horizontally you'll see it says gender on the left-hand side, and it says female 29,000, male 9,182, and it says no data 2,990. So Pfizer Biotech, who are conducting this rigorous study that Health Canada tells you can trust, 2,990 out of 42,000 patients that they did the study, and they didn't know if they were male or female. Now it gets better. So now we talk about ages. It says age range, and I'm not going to dwell too much on all the numbers, but go down right to the bottom. Unknown. They didn't know the age on 6,876 of those 42,000 people.
What can you do a dead reckoning of the percentage of what that would be? The 68, let's say 7,000.
You know what? I will put it in the ribbon when we do
Sorry to throw that at
post-production.
you.
But my guess is that's about
Physics guy.
15%.
Right. Yeah.
And then look at this, and this is the real kicker, folks. The last horizontal column says case outcome. So in other words, they did this test. They gave so many people the vaccine. They had so many people didn't give the vaccine to. Okay. So at the time that they did the reporting that they gave to Health Canada, recovered or recovering. So 19,582, a little less than half of them. Some of them had recovered, but some of them hadn't. So the outcome wasn't there. They were in the recovery process. We don't know if they recovered or not, but at the time, almost half were either recovered or recovering.
Mm-hmm.
Now it gets better.
From COVID, you're saying. Recovering from COVID.
Yeah, where they cut
right? Just wanted to
COVID,
clarify
yeah.
that. Yeah.
And then it says not recovered at the time of the report. In other words, they weren't on the mend, and we didn't know what the outcome was going to be. 11,000 of them. So that's like 25 or so percent of them. They didn't know if they were going to recover.
So that's like an open-ended. So 11,000 plus people. We don't really know what's going to happen to
No,
them.
no. And then how
So
about
we did this test,
It gets
but we don't
better.
know.
It gets better.
Okay, all
Yeah.
right.
The next line is fatal.
Yeah.
So 1,223 people out of 42,000 people in the test died.
Well, that's pretty clear.
Yeah.
That's probably
That's
right.
pretty clear.
That's
yeah.
probably right.
Now,
That's probably the only right number.
Yeah.
I will calculate, because I haven't done it ahead of time, but I'll calculate and put in the ribbon what that ratio is. What were your odds of dying in this test? Now keep in mind that even that number isn't it's not even known, because remember, some of them, 11,000 of them hadn't recovered.
And some were still recovering.
Yeah, and then the
And
other
then-
the other big kicker is the last one. So out of 42,000 patients they studied, 9,400 they didn't know what happened. Now wait a minute. Now this is where I give the shout out to Mr. Oja. If I would have submitted a laboratory report in grade 12 in high school in Stonewall,
Yeah.
Mr. Oja would have thrown this in my face, and I'd have been working late at night to make it proper.
Find out what the unknowns are, dude.
You
That's
know,
what he'd be saying.
and
Well-
there's go ahead.
Sorry, here's an unknown. I'm reading this, and it says the second row after recovered and recovering is recovered with sequel A. So I
Yeah.
had to go to the Google and find out what sequel A means, because I don't want to have it. And turns out it means a pathological condition resulting from a disease, injury, therapy, or other trauma.
So that would be a comorbidity situation.
Well, no, what that is
No,
is
that could
the
be
vaccine caused
Yeah.
it caused a
Okay.
trauma.
Right.
It did damage to the people.
okay.
The vaccine being the
Oh,
therapy.
I see. Yes, you recovered
Yeah.
with a problem.
Right.
Yeah.
Now you have a problem. So you recovered,
That's not funny.
but you have a problem. It
Right.
could be worse now.
Absolutely. I
Right.
mean, who knows what that is? I mean, and there's a summary right below the table that we did. So, of the 42,000 case reports, 2,999 of the cases, the gender of the person wasn't known. Of the 42,000 case reports, 6,876 cases, the age of the person wasn't known. Of the 42,000 case reports, 9,400 cases, the case outcome was not known. In 42,000 case reports, 11,361 cases, the person had not recovered at the time of the report. And of the 42,000 case reports, 1,223 people died.
So how is this a rigorous report. So how is this a report that is being this is closely monitoring? How is this helpful? This report, this chart,
It's
these
not.
numbers. How would this be helpful? Basically, it's saying watch out about this vaccine.
Yes. And the other part about this is you'll see right at the very bottom of that table one, there's a note. So Chris, talk to me a little bit about that note at the bottom of the table A.
The note says in 46 cases reported, age was less than 16 years old, and in 34 cases, less than 12 years old. So I'm not very good with math, but that would make it, there'd be 12 people between 16 and 12 years old, and then 34 people under 12.
And that's for a population, I believe the population 16 years or 14 years of age and younger, I think it
yes.
was 6 million people. So they tested 46 cases for people for 6 million population in Canada. And that doesn't count around the world.
Of that age group.
Of that age group. Isn't it interesting? So how do you feel about what we just told you? How do you feel about that data that we just presented to you? Would you have passed Mr. Osier's class in grade 12? I wouldn't have. Now, we're just about going to end this episode, but we do want to continue just a little bit because in the next few pages, there's summary tables that Pfizer Biotech had given to Health Canada, and it talks about some of the safety concerns. And perhaps we should come back to that in the next episode, or
Yes, let's do
deal
another
with it so we
episode.
can give it its full attention.
Let's do that.
But I guess that's about it for today.
So thank you for joining us for episode 9 for What That Means Is. And again, that title, I know it seems a little bit different, and it is, but we are trying to unpack and disseminate this report and try to say what some of these things mean. So that's what we're calling it, What That Means Is. So I think we did not a bad job of trying to disseminate some of that today.
It might be slightly confusing the way we're throwing numbers out there, but as you asked the viewers about how they feel, I'm looking at this Health Canada report, and it says Canadians can feel confident. I don't know if I'm feeling that confident right now.
Well, that's the question
That's right.
for
Yeah.
Canadians. Are you feeling confident with what we just told you? And by the way, don't take our word for it on this.
No.
You go look it up. You find this. It's on the Government of Canada website. It's called the safety data on the vaccines, and this particular one we're talking about was from Pfizer. But you decide for yourself, is that the level of care and the level of monitoring that they told you were going to get? You were going to get a rigorous process, and you were going to get a strong monitoring system. Is that what you got?
So when you listen to what we say and how we're disseminating this, you're intelligent and you're intuitive. Ask yourself the question. Have yourself answer the question. What does that mean? What this means then is to you. That's how we'd like you to think about it. So sift it through your mind that way, and we believe in you. And again, I want to say again, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid of looking at something.
Don't be afraid.
Just look at it for what it's worth, what it's telling you. Draw your own conclusion. Use your God-given, very, very intelligent mind. We believe in you. And that's why we also want you to let us know what you think. Lots of feedback. We're open to that. So thanks, Chris,
Yep.
again.
Send the comments. Keep the comments coming. They're wonderful.
Yep.
Yeah, on the ribbon below is the email contact address, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for letting us into